Welcome to another edition of In the Spotlight, brought to you by Crimson Cloak Publishing, the earth-friendly publisher with books for both adults and children in a wide variety of genres, available in paperback and hardcover, as ebooks, and with some audiobooks as well. In the Spotlight is a wide-ranging weekly interview show with authors, entrepreneurs, professionals, and other experts. Your host is Cynthia McGregor. Opinions and views expressed by the guests or hosts on this show do not necessarily reflect the opinions and views of the creator, Crimson Cloak Radio, the network, the hosts, or sponsors. And now, here's Cynthia.
Thank you, Carly McCracken, and welcome everyone to another edition of In the Spotlight. My first guest this week is R.J. Bob Waters, a novelist living and working in Las Vegas, Nevada. In his career, Bob was a sworn police officer and detective, a private investigator, a casino security officer, and he has an in-depth knowledge of police procedures as well as the human cost of crimes, including murder. His new novel, Cold But Not Forgotten, is a work of fiction, but based on his career in crime solving. He is currently finishing a prequel, Gone But Not Forgotten. Cold But Not Forgotten is a classic small-town police procedural, a riveting mystery about the murder of a woman who seemingly everybody loved. Her death cuts deep in small-town Elko, Nevada, and leads the Elko County Sheriff's Detective on a chase through a maze of suspects and red herrings. As a career police officer, author Bob Waters brings small-town crime and its often devastating impact on those who are left behind into sharp focus in this warm and very human story of crime, deception, and punishment. Welcome, Bob.
Thank you very much, Cynthia.
Bob,
glad to be here.
Glad to have you. I understand that Cold But Not Forgotten has just been released by the Wild Rose Press. Please tell us more about the book.
The book is, just as you say, it was about a crime in small rural area of Elko County, adjacent to Elko City. The officer in charge and his deputies were looking for a day off, going to the range, and they discovered a body. And that began the story, which technically was not theirs because the range, though it was the county, the woman was found in the city land. But circumstances, including budgets, allowed the Elko County group to investigate it, and it was originally thought to be a medical condition, and then it became obvious that something was not quite right. And the book continues on with the determination of how the woman actually died, as well as that she was murdered, and she wasn't in good health either. She'd been a marathon runner, and her health was declining, and those that were close to her were concerned about her well-being, but she had one more marathon she had to run.
And is this based on a case, an actual case that you worked on as a police officer, or is it only based on things in general that you encountered as a police officer?
It is not based on an actual incident. It is based on my imagination on circumstances that a couple of things were similar here or there on different cases, but never one that had the depth that this one. I created quite a few suspects and twists and turns so that you don't know till the end who really killed her.
And was Elko County your stomping ground when you were a police officer, or no?
Elko County was my stomping ground when I was an investigator for the state of Nevada. I was not a police officer there, but being based out of Carson City, the capital, I had responsibility for cases throughout northern Nevada. So I had been to a lot of rural towns. I liked Elko, the charm of it, the people, and because of that, I decided to make it the subject of the murder, even though I like the people. And I think the book will show that the people themselves, by and large, were very decent, caring people.
Small town police work is far different from the high tech kind of police work you see on TV, like on CSI and other shows. Tell us about how your small town experiences were brought to life in your novel.
Well, one thing is you don't have as much trouble getting the populace to talk to you. Larger cities, people will be resentful or afraid to talk to the police. Whereas in the small town, whether it's the gossip thing or just the concern about what happened in town, it's easier to get information. May not always be right, but you find it easier to get people involved, ask questions. You may get a lot of these, well, I think I saw something over there, and it has no basis, but the people will become more involved. And that is a difference. For a bigger city, a lot of times, I never saw anything. I don't know anything. So that makes it, that part of it, even though we didn't have all of the high-tech equipment, that part of it brought the human element into play more so than it would in a big city.
Tell us about your sequel to Cold But Not Forgotten, Gone But Not Forgotten. Is that, how does it tie in with Cold But Not Forgotten? Is it the same police officers, or
Yes.
What's the tie-in? Same police officers?
Yes. It starts out with my main protagonist, who is Bob Carson, and he's a patrolman, and this part is true. I was that patrolman, and I observed a truck going by me on a summer night in California, and I heard a noise. I looked at the truck. I could see, because of the gas station behind it, I could see completely under the truck. There was nothing dragging, but it sounded like he was having a problem. So I went down the road a little bit, checked a couple things, found a car parked in a closed motel parking lot, door open, engine running, woman's purse on the floor. This is not something that happens. People may leave their car, but a lady never leaves her purse.
Right.
So I went out searching. The only thing between an empty field and the gas station. So we got in my car and I drove up toward the gas station, and spotlights on the field and then on the road in front of me. I could see a path in the debris on the side of the roadway. The further I went, the path became moist. As we got to the corner of the gas station and went around, it was quite moist. 60 feet around the corner, there was a lady's body laying there. The truck was gone. And with only a couple officers to cover several hundred square miles, it was never located.
You didn't get the license plate?
Didn't even get close. I was going the opposite direction when I heard the noise. Everything looked fine. The truckers were always going between Los Angeles and San Francisco area, and they'd break down all the time. This was fruit season. They were always hauling fruit to and from canneries and packing plants. So a broken truck was no big deal. You'd go back and check on it a little bit. And this time, once I found that wet trail, I went right to where the truck was, and he'd already taken off by then. Disengaged the woman and took off. And that is the basis of the series, trying to find the trucker. I had him narrowed down to who it was. I had a name, and started following similar cases throughout the United States.
If you didn't get the license plate, how did you narrow down who the trucker was?
That took similar other incidents over my then starting out career. A lot of times the trucks at night, you can't read their license plate. They're dirty. They've been in these fields picking up produce. You don't know, but you do not see the license plate, especially going the opposite direction. So that was the beginning of the quest for the serial killer. Well, he became a serial killer because we started finding other ladies laying along the side, various highways.
Were they prostitutes?
Some were just unfortunate to get picked up at a truck stop by the trucker.
Uh-huh.
When I transferred, I got a promotion and went to Elko, Nevada to take over their investigation unit after several years. It happened one night I was working. And same circumstance, but the truck, of course, was gone. And that began the whole tale, which goes into Cold But Not Forgotten. The Gone But Not Forgotten was a prequel that I had written, but had not quite polished it, and now it is getting polished, so it'll be the prequel.
What made you decide to become a novelist?
Well, that's an interesting story. Naturally, you do police reports, which are pretty much just the facts, ma'am. And when we retired, my wife and I came down to Las Vegas, and I had nothing to do. My wife makes silver jewelry, so she had something for her hobby, but I didn't. And she said, well, why don't you write your memoirs if you had an interesting life with the Army in Vietnam, you've been an EMT, police officer, put something down for the family to have later. And I did. I wrote some things down, And she says, this is good. You can write. Uh-huh. So I then started to write.
Go on. My phone is ringing. I can't answer it. Go on.
She wanted me to take that and put it into a book, and I said I can't write a book. Well, at the time, I was volunteering with cancer patients, and I'd pick them up at their home and transport them halfway across the Las Vegas Valley to their treating center. So that would give me 2 or 3 hours to sit there and wait for them. So I had my laptop, and I'd sit there, and I started writing. And that's where it began, and over the years since then, I've learned quite a bit more than that. The first book is evident of an inexperienced writer, and as I got going into it, it then becomes what they call my voice, and becomes an interesting story. So with the help of my wife, who is a great editor, and some writing groups locally that we've gone to, I have become a much more proficient, readable writer.
And so you didn't start writing while you were still active on the police force then?
Oh, no. Then it was a matter of go home. Yes, the last thing you thought of outside of writing a report, you didn't want to go any further.
How has being a successfully published novelist changed your life?
It's starting to get a little bit busier. People are wanting to hear about this. People are wanting to book. It is, when I was just had the first book done, nobody really was that interested. Now there's all kinds of things, like got Ned. He's now got you got me into doing things like this with you for PR purposes.
Uh-huh.
And it has made a whole different part of this life. He does this so I have time to write. Because if I had to just worry about publishing the book or publicizing the book, I'd never be able to write. And I miss not getting back at it. So now I am.
Go ahead. Go ahead, Bob. Bob?
Yes.
Go ahead. You were going to say something.
Oh, I'm just now able to get back and do my writing. I let Ned worry about where I'm supposed to be, and we have another fellow called Andres who takes care of the social media part, gets those all set up and puts a blurb in now and then. So that part of it has become less of a burden to me, so I can write, because writers write.
Bob, some authors like to write in coffee shops with people milling all around them. Others need solitude and shut everybody out and close the door of the room and write in absolute solitude. And then there are some who write with music playing and some who write in silence. What's your writing process, and what's your self-editing process, and what other tips do you have for other writers?
Well, I prefer the quiet version. The door can be open. My wife, as I says, she makes silver jewelry, so she's got other parts of the house where she can do her craft. So we're separate, but we're together.
You have
a dog that'll come down and sometimes pop up on ottoman in the writing room and stay there and watch me as I write.
You have a dedicated room for your office?
Yes, I do.
And what other tips do you have for other writers?
Well, the biggest pick is if you're going to be a writer, write. Don't take care of the 27 other things that are going on that you have to do. I mean, this is my wife and myself in a house. Obviously, some things need to be done, but you kind of prioritize when and where you do them, and you've got to write. If you don't write, you lose your momentum. The story has to evolve, and if you try to do a little here, a little there, it'll look that way. I mean, the biggest thing is the phrase is "writers write," and that's what we need to do. And my wife is very good at night. She'll sit down and she'll go over what I wrote and look at it from a reader's point of view. She's very prolific in reading, and she prefers to look at it as a reader would see it, not as I intended it. So she's been invaluable to me in that way.
Do you have a certain time of the day when you write, like from 9 to 5 or from 12 to 1 or certain hours?
It'll be later morning and go into the afternoon. If nothing else interferes, I try to get several hours in there. And then maybe after dinner, she and I will sit down in here in the office, and then she'll be the reader, and I'll sit there, and then she'll say, well, I reworded this. She says, I like it better. What do you think? And she'll read it off to me. And honestly, I don't see much of a difference. But it's just different words, different person, different point of view, and it works. So other times she says, oh, I'll change something 3 times from what you wrote. Then I wind up going back to what you wrote. So we're pretty closely attuned on this.
Are you a plotter or a pantser?
Oh, I'm a pantser. Absolutely all the way. And people have trouble believing it. Well, both of these books are strictly pantsers. I like to say that I start off down the hallway and go into this room, and then I'll turn around and go back to another hallway and wander down someplace else. And this is how I look at my methods. There's been a couple times a pantser can get themselves in trouble. You're going into one room and it's like, oh, I painted myself in a corner. What am I going to do? And then you find a way out.
Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, some of these ideas are crazy, but they are pantsers. You know, and they'll tie in down the line, and people will like, well, how did you know this when you did that? I didn't. When I did this, I had no idea what I was going to do about it several chapters later. But it all works out, and it all fits together neatly, and as you can see by Cold But Not Forgotten, there is an involved plot, and you don't know who did it. And your suspicions will jump from one to another and back, and then at the end it's like, no, really? She did it? I didn't know. Why would she do it? It's just a whole different thing, and I enjoy it. I love it.
How did you find a publisher?
Went to the Las Vegas Writers Conference, which is put on by the Henderson Writers Group, which I was a member. And the funny part of it was we were standing there at cocktail hour, and I was talking to a lady who'd done some federal investigation, and my wife next to me by our table, and then this lady comes down the hallway and goes up to my wife and says, "So what do you write?" And she says, "Well, I don't." And then she spins me around and says, "But he does." And that's where I met Allie for Wild Road Press and talked to her. And she said, "Send me your manuscript," which was unusual to get that much out of the first meeting.
Yes.
And so she got it. And it was a little far out. It had Area 51 and aliens and things like that. And she seemed to like it, but she couldn't get the committee at Wild Rose to buy it. It was just a little out of their realm now, which in subsequent time, it appears like they might be ready for it again. But anyway, she said, "No," she says, "I like your voice. You got something more mainstream." Well, I had finished Cold But Not Forgotten, so I sent it to her, and she says yes. And that was it.
Great.
We got the contract and went through the editing, and there we are. It's history. I got a book.
Bob, we're about out of time. Your website is rjwaters-author.com / right? And where can people find Cold But Not Forgotten?
Okay, rjwaters-author.com, yes.
And where can people find Cold But Not Forgotten? On that site?
Yeah, Cold But Not Forgotten, Amazon, just any of the sites carry it. You can get it direct from Wild Rose Press. You can get it from Amazon, and you can even go to Barnes & Noble and order it.
Well, thank you very much, Bob Waters, for being with us today. Good luck with your book. I hope you sell mega copies of it. I have to do a commercial now, and then I'll be right back with my next guest. Again, thanks a lot. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Bye-bye.
Now, remember, this show is brought to you by Crimson Cloak Publishing, which has books of all sorts, fiction, nonfiction, kids, adults, and this week featuring Claimed by Nikolai Radin, Radin Warriors Book 1, written by Dina Holm. And what's it about? When Abby Harris takes her faithful German Shepherd out for a hike in Oregon's beautiful mountains, getting abducted by aliens isn't even a blip on her radar. Her trusty can of bear spray and pocket knife aren't much help against the 7-foot monsters who swoop in out of nowhere to transport her to a ship in space. You can buy the book at crimsoncloakpublishing.com or at https://www.amazon.com/ claimed hyphen Nicolai, that's NICOLAI hyphen Raiden, that's RAIDEN hyphen warriors hyphen book hyphen ebook /DP /BO7R 24YW7P / Don't even try to remember it all. Just go to Crimson Cloak Publishing and look for Claimed by Nicolai, the Raiden Warriors Book 1 by Dina, that's DENNA Home. Again, that's Claimed by Nicolai, Raiden Warriors Book 1. And now it's time for my second guest, Rick Stepp-Bolling. Rick is a retired professor of writing from Mount San Antonio College, who now resides in Ramona, California, with his wife Francie and their collection of rescued animals, including horses, dogs, turtles, and a 500-pound pig named Penny. Rick has 5 books published: Smoke and Mirrors, a book of poetry; Autocide, AUTOCIDE, a collection of short stories; Icarian, Patchman, his first novel in the fantasy science fiction series, and Patchman 2, published by Crimson Cloak Publishers, our sponsors. He can be contacted at his website, ricksteppbolling.com. Let me spell that for you. Rick, R-I-C-K, no space, one word, S like in Sam, T like in Thomas, E like in egg, P like in parachute, P like in parachute, hyphen, B like in boy, O like in olive, L like in Larry, L like in Larry, I like in ice cream, N like in Nancy, G like in George.com, or on Facebook at Rick Stepp-Bolling. And he's here with us today to introduce 2 of his latest books, The Battle for Sumia, Patchman 2, and Icarian. The Battle for Sumia continues the Patchman fantasy saga, and at this point in the series, Sumia is battling for its survival in its war against Imperiana. Var, the Patchman, knows that Sumia's only hope lies in his ability to recruit warriors from other domains. Misha, the one-armed teenager, and Ten, the leader of a rebel band, travel to Haba Yan in search of the lore mistress Karash, but they find more than they bargained for in the attempt. Icarian tells the backstory of Ka, the half-raptor, half-man, who plays a major role in the Patchman series. Welcome, Rick. Rick?
Thank you, Cynthia.
I can't hear you.
I'm here.
Okay, talk a little louder or get a little closer to the microphone.
Okay. How's
Better.
this?
That's better.
Okay.
Rick, when did you first start your writing career?
I first started my writing career in high school when I was sending my never-to-be girlfriend poetry anonymously and putting them in her locker. So that started my poetry career as a writer, and I continued doing that until college, when I finally started writing short stories.
And what advice would you give to developing writers, Rick?
Well, First of all, I think it's important for writers to get feedback. So I would hope that they would join some kind of writing group somewhere, either that or a creative writing class at their local community college or college, where they can get some kind of feedback from other writers. And this is important in developing their style and their voice, all of which are going to be critical when they become a little bit more at ease with what they're trying to produce in their stories. So that would be my first suggestion. Find a writing group, get some critiques, and see what people say about their writing. And don't be judgmental. Let people say what they want to say about your writing.
You mean don't
So
be
that
defensive.
would be my first.
You mean don't be defensive. Is that what you mean?
Yes, I think that's important for people to know.
What's the worst experience you've had in your writing career?
Oh, that's an interesting story. Most people like to say what they thought was best about their writing, but for me, what changed my professional career was when I was at UCLA in my freshman year. It took a lot of courage, but I gave my English professor some of my poetry to critique. And he returned it the following week and said, "This is approximately what a Victorian housewife would write." At that point, I said, I can either throw away everything I've written and give up writing as a career, or take that as a challenge and make a change in my life. So that was the downtime for me, and I decided I would take it as a challenge. I went on to read more poets and rewrite some of the things that I had written, and I think that really helped my writing career.
Rick, insecurities are always a part of life. What is your greatest insecurity as far as your writing goes?
I think most writers' insecurity come with their fear that nobody's going to like their writing, that somewhere along the line they're going to be found out to be a failure at what they do. And I think every writer, unless they have the world's greatest ego, has that kind of fear and anxiety that somehow what they're writing isn't good enough, that they need to become better, or they need to just say, well, this is just not for me, it's not my career. So I think that's my anxiety, as well as I think a lot of other writers.
How did you come up with the storyline for Patchman and Patchman 2?
Well, as I have recommended for other beginning writers, go to a critique group. And that's exactly what I did after I retired. I wrote a short story called Patchman, and I read it for my group. It's about an old man who makes magical patches that repairs rusty kettles or bicycle wheels or broken hearts or lost limbs. And when I read that, people said, no, that's not a short story. That's a novel. You need to do something more with it. And so that was the initial development of Patchman. And from there, I built the Patchman world a little bit at a time. And it's taken now 5 books of the Patchman series before I have a pretty good foundation of what that world looks like.
So the Patchman series is not finished then?
No. Patchman 2 is only the second book. The third book finishes that particular cycle in the saga of the battle between Imperiana and Sumia. Then there is Icarian, as I suggested, is the backstory for Ka, who is an Icarian raptor. And then I do the backstory for another character. And finally, the last story I've written deals with some of the characters going to another world to meet their doppelgangers.
And you've written all these books
so
already?
That's where...
You've written all these,
I'm sorry?
You've written all these books already then? You finished writing
them?
Yes,
they're already written.
And
right.
Crimson Cloak is going to publish all of them?
That's what Carly said. So
Good.
As far as I know, yes.
Good.
They have plans to publish them all.
Now, what major themes were you exploring in the series?
Well, there are a number of major themes. The first one is anti-war theme that goes throughout all the novels. There is also the theme of family, of how family may be disjointed. They may not even be connected by a bloodline, but people are family no matter what, if they connect emotionally with each other. And a third major theme is creating a balance in the world. Right now we're seeing how unbalanced we are, and it's not something I would recommend for a country or a world or a novel to be unbalanced. And so a lot of these characters are trying to balance their lives and the world they live in. So I think those are the major themes that I've tried to develop.
You started your career in writing as a poet. What made you switch over to fiction?
Well, when I started my teaching career at Mount SAC, I decided I wanted to continue my writing career as well. But I'd only experienced poetry, and I dabbled in short stories. So what I did was I took a creative writing class from one of the instructors there, just auditing it, and she had too many people in her class. She said, I'm going to have to divide this, and I'm going to have to find another instructor to teach the other half. So she said, I'll teach the poetry half. I need to find somebody to teach the fiction half. And I came up to her after class and I said, well, I'd like to volunteer to teach that class. And she said, well, what kind of background do you have? And I'm an English major. I've got my degree in English literature, and I've got my master's. So she said, well, let's give it a shot. And we communicated the whole semester and talked about how the class was going, how it was structured. And that was the impetus for me being able to teach a creative writing class at Citrus College. They hired me on because I now had experience in teaching that. And what I did was I took all of those things that I was learning about writing fiction and put them into practice. And that's what I eventually did. I wrote, along with my students, stories, short stories, plays, and so forth. And we kind of collaborated together as the semesters went on. So that's how I got into writing more short story and fiction writing.
You stated in your bio
The novel.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead. I thought you were finished. Go ahead.
I'm probably going to answer another question. I didn't start writing a novel until after I retired from Mount Sac, and that was because of the writing group that I was involved with, the Coffeehouse Writers Group in San Dimas. They recommended that I continue writing, and Patchman was the result of that. So I didn't actually create a full-length book until that time, and that was about 6 years ago.
You stated in your bio that you and your wife have a number of rescue animals. Could you tell us more about them? I'm especially fascinated by the 500-pound pig.
Well, as I said, most of our animals are rescues. So the pig, Penny, this goes along with that humorous story that I was going to tell. Penny was found by a hunter at a wild pig ranch, and he found Penny's mom had been killed by a mountain lion. He looked around and found a tail sticking out of a rabbit hole. So he dug it up, and there was Penny. She must have been no more than a few days old. She bit him, and he said, "Okay, go away." But she followed him all the way back to his truck and said, "I know where you're going." And so he happened to be a friend of ours, and we took Penny in, and Penny's been with us for all of that time now. She's about 10 years old. She was raised as a dog in the house. She used the dog door. She slept on the couch like the other dogs. She would go on walks with us, with the other dogs. But there came a time when Penny got a little too big to go through the dog door, and she wanted to root on other people's lawns when we took walks. So we said, "Nope, Penny, sorry, you're going to have to stay home when we go on walks." Well, it just so happened that we were on a walk, and the day before I had bought a 24-pack of Bud Light that I got on sale, and I had kept that upstairs, intending to put it in the refrigerator later on. Well, when we got home, my daughter said, "Dad, what's that smell?" And I said, "I don't know, but it's coming from upstairs." So walked upstairs, and there were all the beers, open and drunk, by Penny. She was downstairs snoring on the couch because she was a little bit tipsy after having drunk all the beer.
A little bit tipsy.
I'm sorry.
24 beers. She must have been drunk out of her mind.
Well, as my wife said, well, at least now you have somebody to drink with.
Oh my God.
So she has not touched a single drop of alcohol since that day.
Rick, as much as I think it would be great fun to own a pig, I never could because I love bacon and pork, and once I owned a pig, I would be unable to eat bacon and pork. So that means I can never own a pig.
Yes, that has been a similar problem with me too. You get you get to know these animals, and it's, I just don't want to make friends with a cow, or a fish. So, or a chicken. So for right now, Penny is still with us. She's still out in the dog run outside and enjoying her life. And as long as she's there, no one's going to eat her or any of her friends.
Yeah. What other animals do you have, Rick?
We have 6 dogs. They're all rescue dogs. We found one dog, Luke. He was up in the hills. Somebody abandoned him as a puppy, and we just lost him last week.
Oh, I'm sorry.
He was very old and very sick. We have the twins. The twins are 2 dogs that were left at a pet shop when they were 1 day old. The pet shop owner took them to our vet, and the vet said, well, I know somebody who probably could foster these puppies. And my wife said, look, we're only fostering the puppies. They're going to go back after they've been weaned. And that's it. And I said, oh, sure. Well, after they were weaned, of course, my wife said, okay, we can take them back. And I said, over my dead body. So that's Tess and Cole, named after the famous outlaws, Cole Younger and Tessie James. And those, along with a half St. Bernard, half Pit Bull, who kind of looks like she belongs from another world. And then a couple of very small dogs that were going to be euthanized at a pound. Those kind of make up our dog world. The horses are all from the BLM, except for one. She was from a friend who had to move, and so we took that horse. And so there are never-ending stories with all these rescue animals. Believe me, I could go on forever about that. But anyway, that's the gist of it. We have a very large family.
I hear that. Well, getting back to your writing, Rick, do you have any plans to write a book outside of the Patchman series?
As a matter of fact, I'm in the middle of one now. A couple of years ago, Crimson Cloak had a contest for short story writing, and the prompt was a picture, and in the picture in the foreground was a black horse with a rider, and the horse had red eyes. In the background was a gibbet, which is a gallows, and the body hanging from it, and a lake, and then in the back, and beyond that was a castle. And they said, write a story including all of those elements. So I said, that sounds like a challenge. I'm always up for a writing challenge. So I put those elements into a story and called it Gray Riders. And I wrote the story from the perspective of the horse. Although that didn't win the contest, it was put into the anthology. And that became the start of, I said, I really like the story. I'd like to continue where it's going. And then it became Gray Riders, the novel. The only problem was my computer and I have had issues, and it erased 10,000 words from my novel. this last weekend. So I either get to rewrite or I go down to the Apple Bar and find out what I can do, see if I can recover any of that. So that's where I'm at. Gray Riders is my next novel.
Are you participating in NaNoWriMo?
I have not done that. I write all the time anyway, so I don't need to be pushed by anyone or anything.
I hear you.
That's. I'm familiar with it. I think most of that is for people who need a little impetus to get writing all the time, and I don't need that.
No. Well, again, your website is rickstepp-bolling.com. That's RickStepp-BOLLING.com. On Facebook, you're Rick Stepp-Bolling, all one word, no spaces, no hyphens, nothing. At Crimson Cloak Publishing, it's www.crimsoncloakpublishing, all written as one word solid, .com /Rick Stepp, STEPP -Bolling, BOLLING .html. At Amazon, look for Patchman and Patchman 2. I'm not a fiction reader, Rick, but write the story of Penny and all your animals, and I'll, by God, buy that one.
Penny has actually surfaced in a number of my short stories.
Does she play a major part, or what?
Well, in one story, it was a Halloween story called The Day the Pig Stood Still. Yes, she is turned into her evil other self and gets even with some of the people that have taken her brethren to the butcher shop. So it's an interesting take on things.
Well, thank you very much, Rick Stepp-Bolling, for being our guest this week on In the Spotlight. Good luck to you, mega sales to you, and I'll see you around Crimson Cloak. Okay?
Well, thank you very much.
Take care.
I appreciate the interview and in joining your audience. I'm hoping they'll have an opportunity to go to Crimson Press. It's a great place, great authors there, a lot of really interesting books.
And a wonderful person in charge, Carly McCracken.
Yes, she is.
So, folks, I'll remind you to tune in again next week, and in the meanwhile, to pass a smile along, as I always say. And this is Cynthia MacGregor. I'll see you here next week.
You have been listening to In the Spotlight with your host, Cynthia MacGregor, brought to you by Crimson Cloak Publishing. For a wide variety of books for both adults and children in print, ebook, and audio formats, join us every Tuesday at the same time as In the Spotlight brings you interesting guests to entertain and enlighten you. I'm Carly McCracken. On behalf of Crimson Cloak Publishing, thank you for joining us, and we hope you'll join us again next week.